Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2:56 p.m. Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. I just woke up from, like, a really long sleep. I had stayed up yesterday, for over 30 hours. Not good. Went to bed around, I think, 10 o'clock last night. 9? No, 7. Yeah, around 10 o'clock. 9:30. Actually, it's like 9:20. And I just woke up like an hour ago, really. So, like, what is that? Like, 12 hours. 16 hours, roughly. In and out of consciousness for the past, like, 5 hours. Anyways, I have a dream to share with you. And a couple dreams, if possible, but I don't really know if I care to share the other ones because I don't remember them very well. So, I'll share this first one, and we'll go from there. This first one's actually the last one, most recent one I had. And, it was interesting. There were this group of people, this organization who was trying to do something on the moon, or whatever, or someplace, some other planet, I think. And things had gone awry. So, a different group of people in these, like, spacesuits with, like, military spacesuits with weapons, were tasked to go to this place, this facility, and figure out what happened. Can you hear Finnegan in the background? He's barking. He's a barky boy. I had joined this group somehow, either as a stowaway or accidental, I don't know, maybe as part of the group for some reason. And I watched not watched, but I was there. I'm sorry, I had to fiddle with my fingers. I had to move the phone, so I was probably too loud. I apologize. I was there. And there was this group of, like, 4 people, these military people, who went down this sort of, like, this, like, makeshift shaft they had made to go into the depths of the planet or moon or whatever. And it was a diagonal pathway, right? Instead of it being like an elevator shaft going down, it had like an elevator built into it going diagonally, like a Half-Life style, if you know what I mean. There's a scene in Half-Life where you're in an elevator going down, or going up maybe. You're going up, and mud crabs are jumping off the top part of where you're going to onto it, and you have to, like, fight them. And so they were going down, and the elevator wasn't working, so they had to walk down, right? It was a flat bottom, unlike in Half-Life 2, where it's an open area. And it was a pathway. It's a tunnel. And they were going their way down, and they were faced with these occasional, like, let's say, monsters. You know, it was almost like a zombie scenario, only like alien zombies, kind of like necromorphs, but not quite. A little bit different. Like the Thing kind of style almost. Actually, I know why I had this dream now. Because I was watching Smitty last night before bed at some point, and I was rewatching his Nuclear Nightmare gameplay. And in Nuclear Nightmare, there is these black infection stuff that can infect you, and like little crab thingies, like spider things, and little worms That's why I had this dream. Okay, it makes a lot more sense now. It's similar to that, but not the same. It was like almost like a symbiote parasites zombie kind of scenario instead, with the venom, but different, and they're more like zombie like than they are like venom like. So it's a whole mixture of things, and this group of military personnel, the squad, right, of like 4 or 5, were going down, and the whole area was kind of run down. Like the electricity was like either there was emergency lights or there's no lights. I don't remember. And there was this individual walking up towards them in like this like black plastic bag. Their upper half was wrapped in the plastic bag, and their lower half was just walking. And they're like, "Don't move, state your business. Who are you? Yada yada." This whole thing, and then because the military personnel are obviously very cautious, they had heard that something bad had gone down, and either they all knew what could happen or they didn't know yet. And so this individual started picking up the pace and walking faster up towards them. And then she started running full kilter towards them. And then they're all like, last chance. And then they started opening fire eventually. The individual went down and started squirming on the ground. And even though they kept shooting the individual, they kept squirming until he stops. And one of them got closer, see what's going on. And from the bag, there's a slight opening at the top, for whatever reason, and from the bag, the opening, out sprung this like black like goop like thing that went to go attack one of the guys, the troops or whatever. I don't remember exactly what happened. I think they survived. Like they got it off in time. But I think the helmet was damaged, and so he had to take his helmet off or something. Now, there is air in these tunnels. They had the helmets on because they were out in space at first, but they knew there was air in there. They keep the helmets on just in case, it's important. So he had to take his helmet off because it was damaged, and they figured out how to dispose of the creature. Either it ran off or they killed it, whatever, I don't know. But these things can't survive without a host for very long. So it would have died eventually anyways. Which implies the hosts are still alive. So they make their way down, and they eventually reach the bottom, and where there's this door, like a huge platform at the bottom, for whatever. But then you go further, and then there's a door, and it leads further into the facility. And I remember the point of view of the dream kept having third points of views, from a camera point of view, or just a typical like over the shoulder point of view and what have you. I remember they went to this doorway and there was water there. Something was slightly flooding the area a little bit, so it must be a water main that had burst or whatever. And so they were ankle deep in water, and they were all I remember there was a point where I was communicating with them somehow. I guess I had access to cameras. Me and the other guy that had been up at the top, and because we were in a facility, inside a facility. At some point, I remember at a previous scene, I was at the opening of the elevator shaft, and talking to the other guy, complaining and being worried, I don't remember what I was saying, but I was just complaining and being worried and stuff. And I guess one of the members was someone I cared about, either a good friend or a family member or a lover. I don't know. I don't think they were a lover. No one. I didn't have that feeling towards any of the individuals, but clearly, it was. I think one of them was my brother or whatever, maybe sister. I don't know. I had someone who was important to me go down there, which explains why I was there. I was probably part of the science part of the team, and they were the military part. So I was there and trying to guide them to the facility. And I told them, don't let those things attach to you. If you do, you're pretty much good as dead. And something along those lines. Anyways, these people, they made their way through the waterlogged room, facility this room, right? These rooms, and there were these things under the water, scurrying under the water, and they were shooting at them and what have you. And then one of them got infected. The person who lost their helmet. I don't even know if they lost their helmet, but the point is, one of them finally got infected, and it was like, get off, get off, get off. And eventually it went into his face, right? And this is gonna be very squeamish, I apologize. But it started to absorb into his face, right? And into his head, through his eye and ears and mouth and his nose, and he's still screaming, get it off, get it off. And I think they eventually gunned him down at some point. They didn't want to. They had to. And he stops moving. He dies, right? So that was the end of that, right? And then I think because the creature was in his head and it was trying to acclimate to his head, them shooting his head while still doing that also killed the creature. So it was gone, right? It was dead. But there's more. There's plenty more in the entire facility. So they're aware of this now, and they're like, oh crap, and they have to deal with this. And they weren't happy about losing their member, right? One of them wanted to turn around and bring the body back up, and I think they all agreed to do that. We have to go back. We don't know what's going on. And so his body wasn't moving anymore, and unlike before, because with the previous body, the one wrapped in the plastic bag, their helmets can help them to detect life signs, and they could still detect life signs when that happened, that initial encounter happened. But they couldn't detect any more life signs from their buddy. So they could tell he's gone. So they brought the body back up. And me and the other guy were analyzing the body. We had the whatever, right? Turns out that either the creature inside the parasite wasn't as dead as we thought, or its dead flesh or whatever created this sort of conduit. Because first the scientist, head scientist, encountered this, and I later on, when I came in on my own, separate encounter, also encountered this scenario, right? Because this dream is kind of like a movie. It would change scenes, not just from my point of view, but also different points of views. And at a previous point, it was the head scientist's point of view, and he was talking to this voice. He was surprised at first, who are you? What's going on? And the voice was kind of explaining that it was the parasite, or at least the head parasite, the consciousness of the parasite. And I don't remember what they talked about, but they talked about little bits, and eventually the head scientist left. Sometime later, right, maybe several hours later, I come in for my own reason, right? I'm trying to do my own research, right? Or maybe I go in without anyone knowing, and then eventually I encounter the same voice, and we have a conversation. The whole conversation, it basically boils down to me thinking how interesting this is, and me trying to ask the motive, and kind of having this idea, you need hosts, don't you? You're parasites, and you need hosts to live. And this is yes, basically confirmed or denied my words. It was clearly an odd scenario. And whereas the head scientist was more hostile to this individual, I was not. I was all more okay, so you have been attacking us because you need hosts. We are hosts. But what if things don't have to be hostile? And so then I started to explain to this entity the things going on with humanity, who we are, what we're capable of, the technology of I talked about how we're very individualistic, and there's been scenarios like, for instance, people getting bugs in their ears or in their eyes. I mentioned how there was a lady I read at one time, how she had like a spider or a cockroach in her ear that clearly terrified her, and they had to do surgery to get it out. And another person who like had to do someone's eyeball, right? A construction worker who like got dust in his eyes, and it turns out it wasn't just dust. I guess the heat and the dust caused it's very squeamish. I apologize. Please bear with me. For those who don't want to listen, you have to skip this. And basically he got a fly in his eye, a fly egg in his eye, and eventually his eye was hurting, and they did surgery, and they pulled out a fly out of his eyeball that had grown from the egg, and it was dead, so it must have died at some point, but it was a full fly. It was not cool. Not a fun scenario, like freaking Constantine style scenario, you know what I mean? And I'm explaining to this entity that, like, we humans cannot stand the idea of, like, certain parasites, like tapeworms, what have you. But the thing is, the truth is, we actually do have creatures within us that are symbiotic. They are other entities, creatures, that live inside us, and they provide a benefit of some sort. And we, in turn, provide them a home and also a source of food. So, clearly, our bodies are fine with this idea, but most humans aren't even aware of this circumstance, right? So I posited this idea to the entity. What if there was a more symbiotic, peaceful way of doing this? Would you be more willing to cooperate with us and give us time to acclimate, right? Because I just switched positions. Sorry, my hand's hurting. I explained to the entity that we value individuality. However, we are also very communal, right? We are very tribal as a species. We desire the community and being part of a group, usually. And we have ways of communicating with each other over long distances through our technology, that we've developed. And so I was thinking to them, like, what if you do join with us in some kind of way, but you don't take control. You allow us individuality, but also create this sort of like way of communication amongst each other, right? Or something along these lines. I don't remember the exact details anymore, but eventually the entity was like, "We will think upon this. Meet with us later." And so I left. And eventually later on, I come back, and meanwhile the group of military personnel are still going down. They decided to go for another round, right, and try to go deeper, and they're more careful this time. One of them has a flamethrower they brought with them, I think. And then like later on, I get like a sensation, a weird sensation of like being drawn somewhere, and I realize it's the entity in the room of the corpse of the military guy trying to get my attention from the other room. Right, the other building. And so I traveled there, right? And eventually I talk to them again, and they explain, we have considered your proposition and are considering going through with it. But they had apprehensions, because obviously we had military personnel going down, being all hostile and everything. I explained to them, yeah, humans can be pretty hostile. We have had issues with each other in the past, and honestly, there'll always be issues, but there'll be plenty of people who would be willing to accept you. But I ask that you be patient. Most people do not like change. It takes a long time for them to accept change willingly, peacefully, and I ask that you are not in a hurry. Those who want to join us will join us willingly, but I also ask that you do not let them join for zealous purposes, right? Like, you're not a faith. Don't become religious, because that's going to be a problem. It has to be a logical acceptance of you and your hive mind thing. And I do some explanations why, but like, eventually we go back and forth, and they agree. And they want me to be the first, right? I would become the head of the hive mind of sorts. And this came about because I had previously explained to them of who I actually was. I had explained to them previously in the first encounter that I actually reincarnated. I actually died, and I came from a world that's different from this one, where this entity does not exist. They just don't. And I have this desire as to when I die to have my library. I explained the library, the lighthouse, my intent with that to become mother. And also I explained my often fantasy I have of being this hive mind to begin with, of this flesh hive mind mother, different iteration of mother. And the idea behind it of being a willing joining of it, and also exemplifying this individuality within this hive mind community, right? And so that's, I explained it, and during this whole ordeal, right, both scenarios, both the first meeting I had with it, the second meeting, it could read my mind a little bit, and I showed it my images, my thoughts, and the intents and what have you. And so when I met them a second time, they were talking about how they like to attempt to do this and try it. And I told them, great, but we have to avoid a Dead Space scenario, and I explained to them what Dead Space was, and be more similar to the Venom scenario, but more different, right? More like my fantasy with the mother and the point was, it agreed, and it said that they would have to go into my head, and they promised to go slow and not just consume my brain. And at first I was going to, but then I was scared. I had a blobule had appeared on the table that the body was on. Either it came from the body, and that the entity inside its head wasn't as dead as we thought, or a new one had popped up somewhere, somehow, at random, showing that they can exist for a time outside of a body, out of a host. And it just reached out, not forcefully, just reached out, and waited for me to come in contact with it. And so I reached out my hand, but then got scared and explained to it, I was terrified, because I don't want to forget. Memories are important to me. And also, I'm very terrified at the prospect of it being inside of me and going inside of me. And I knew it had to go through my eye or my ear or whatever. And I was terrified. I explained to it, I wanted this to happen, but I was scared, and I need someone to hold me. And this whole time, I forgot to mention this earlier, this entity also showed up as a visual representation of this random man who you couldn't really tell what he was wearing. Maybe a coat or a robe, but it wasn't quite that, almost regal. You could tell he was very regal. He had very long hair, of an undiscernible color. It was interesting, right? But he did seem to reflect almost me a little bit, in a way, only male, because I was female in the dream, and I was like, I can you hold me while we do this? And I say this as I go to grab him, but my hand just goes right through him. He's just an image, right? Like a mirage. He's like, I can't, I'm sorry. Because he explains he is the entity, the parasite that's waiting on the bed, basically. And, but I'm like, I can't do this. I want to, but I can't. I'm sorry, I'm scared. And then in comes the scientist guy. He's like, I can help. And I turn around, and he explains that he had a conversation with this entity previously as well, and rejected it, and then learned later on about my initial talk with it. So this entire time between the first talk and second talk I had with the entity, and we were both in the room together, monitoring the military personnel, he had learned at some point of my conversation and decided to let me be. And then he eventually gets brought in, again, after I'm talking to the entity being scared. And so the scientist says, fine, I will hold you and what have you. And I said, okay, but understand, both of you, I'm going to scream. I'm going to be scared. I'm going to resist. Be patient with me. Go slow, please. I'm going to be terrified, even though I know what's going on, you know? And so I had the head scientist just like hold me, like almost pseudo cradle me. Well, I go to reach for the entity, and it crawls on my hand, goes slow up my arm, and my heart rate's going up. It's going higher and higher, and my breathing's getting higher, and I'm starting to hyperventilate a little bit. And then it finally gets up to my face, and then like it has to make its way into me. I'm not going to go into gruesome details, but I start screaming, and like you know, it's terrifying. It's not fun. And thankfully, me as a dreamer is seeing it from a third person point of view, so I don't actually experience it directly. One of the benefits of having a third point of view dream, like a movie. But the head scientist has to hold me down and like hold my arms. I'm trying not to grab at it. I'm like, my hands, even though my free hand goes to grab at it, I resist doing it, but it still freaks me out. And so I grab onto the scientist and they grip him really hard. And eventually I pass out. And the entity is still kind of there and communicates with the head scientist, explaining that she'll be fine. She's unconscious right now. I'm currently acclimating to her body and her brain in a way so I don't consume it. Like, he's struggling to do it without destroying my brain. And it's something he has to do newly, because before, usually they just take over the brain, but now he has to not do that. And so he's trying to find a place to do it without hurting her, with hurting me, right? And so they go through that, and eventually, after maybe like an hour or so, or maybe half an hour, the military personnel are in the facility, and they've been alone without comms for this entire time, because they've been trying to get contact with the scientist who's not there anymore. It was just the two of us. It was basically a small team of like 7, the 5 initial military personnel and 2 scientists, myself and the head scientist, right? And now they have no comms. This entire time they're panicking because they keep getting attacked by these husks of people charging at them in the facility. They went deeper in, and it's like a freaking like zombie scenario, but fast zombies, you know. And eventually, whether it's half an hour or not, I don't know, at some point, maybe only a few minutes, the zombies stop in their tracks. And the military personnel are confused, like, what's going on? And the zombie people are just like, they just stand there and then just either walk away or they sit down, or I don't know. They calm down. And then the head scientist gets back on the comms, and he explains, return to base, we're done here. And they're explaining what the hell was going on, where did he go? I'll explain when you get back up here. And then meanwhile, I'll come back on the comms, like, we won't hurt you anymore. Return. And they're like, what? And so basically the whole shenanigans and stuff goes on, and there's some verbal hostilities and explanations, and eventually explain to them that we are no longer going to just force ourselves upon you. And I eventually explained that I am still here. I'm still here, by the way. I willingly joined with them, and we are going to attempt to create this sort of symbiosis together. And I explained to the military personnel that I thus explained to the hive mind, they understand not everyone's going to be willing to join. And they're not going to force themselves, as long as they have some hosts and some way of surviving, right? And so, clearly the military personnel are not happy, and they're unhappy, especially because they lost their mates, right? And I explained to them, yes, that's not a great scenario. There's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. This agreement happened too late. And if I had been there sooner, and this happened sooner, maybe this could have all been avoided. But unfortunately, it's nothing we could do about it. Their mate was already dead, you know. It's just unfortunate. And clearly some of them are not happy with it, but my sibling is there as well. they've been silent the entire time. My sibling had been like crossed their arms in the corner against the wall, watching this unfold. And eventually they think back to how I was. And because I must have talked about the fantasy I had of becoming mother of a larger hive mind in the past or something. And they just like, they've been frowning this entire time, right? They haven't been happy. And eventually they just like scoff, like almost like a scoff and a laugh. And they start laughing. They're like, oh my gosh, you actually did it. And everyone's just like looking at them, right? And let's say it's a brother. I can't decide if it's brother or sister. Let's say it's a brother, right? And he walks up to me. He's like, you actually did it. You are a mad woman. You know this? He's still not happy. He's frowned. He's like, yeah, I know. And he's doubting. He's like, are you really there? Are you really Svella? And I do something. I go, what the fuck do you think? Just like in the middle of this, like, and this, like, give him a weird face. And like, he just starts laughing. And I guess the hive mind decides to like pull his influence away because the entire time the hive mind was there and I was very like composed and like very serious this entire time. And so he pulled its influence away from me. And so it's just me. Right. And I explained to him this whole scenario just now. Like the reason why I was so like deadpan this entire time was because it was both me and the hive mind speaking, but the hive mind was able to pull its influence away and allow me to be in the forefront. So clearly there's some cooperation here, you know? And the brother still has apprehensions about this. He's not happy about this, but he's going to give the hive mind a chance and give me a chance, right? And so meanwhile, the couple of the military personnel is not happy with this and doesn't want to. And they go to their superiors and explains all this. And then eventually my brother goes in and also explains his point of view, his side of things. And guess what? The military decides, you know what? Fine. Bring him home. We're gonna accept this. And the military personnel who's not happy with this is like, what? But I mean, us, you, the viewers, and me, the dreamer, outside the dream, understand why. Because obviously the military probably see this as an opportunity, right? Of course they would. Of course they would want to, militarize this, obviously. And me in the dream and the hive mind, since it shares my memories, also understand this. So we both understand they're going to try to militarize us. How that's going to go about, I'm not sure. I'm sure we're going to resist because we don't want to be militarized. But there's ways of, we're going to explain to them the only thing they can benefit from us is the communication, right? We'll essentially showcase that the hive mind can become a sort of a secondary source of like phones, of sorts. But it's not perfect and what have you. And so the military sees this as a boon because they can have their military personnel do that. They're radios, basically, like organic radios and computers. And so the military clearly sees how useful this could actually be. Eventually things go well and a larger sort of nation, a mental hive mind nation develops with me as the core. And it goes well. I mean, most people are willing. I tell the military previously, they have to be willing and they have to be completely accepting of the hive mind. It's not a pleasant experience. But they'll work together to find ways of making a more pleasant experience eventually. And so it's a whole hullabaloo. And the dream basically ends before this. This is the military part, and the military personnel coming up is actually a daydream I just made up just now. The dream actually ended during the initial invasion, basically, of the parasite into my body. When I was screaming, what have you, and I passed out, and the hive mind told the head scientist that she'll be okay, she needs to rest. That's when the dream ended. I woke up from that. Just because I woke up, I couldn't go back to sleep. And so I daydreamed the rest of this. Some of it I made up just now. And the other part, which I'm telling you now, of when I had this daydream, right, after I woke up, of like years later. And like scenarios of like these youngins, this 16-year-old teen who had been born with the symbiote and having like a sibling like fight with their symbiote basically, and like not wanting the symbiote anymore. And like I explained to them through, or this like individual, because it's still young, this sort of like peaceful takeover is still young, and I'm there explaining to this young woman, this like 16, 17-year-old teen, about how there's no way to remove them, unfortunately. The only way to do that would be to be purge them, and they would die, and then or to instead kill you, right? Or maybe no, actually, yeah, explain this. And the young teen was like, I don't want them to die, right? I just want them out. And then I explained to them, well, alternatively, we can just kill you. And then she thinks about it. She starts like thinking about it, like, and like having her head in her hand against her head, like bunched up. And she's seriously considering it. And the symbiote, meanwhile, has its own voice, right? Because it's a hive mind, so they have their own like voice separate from the. I don't have to just talk to just the girl, right? I can see the like mirage of the entity in the girl explaining, no, just kill me. I don't want her to die. And then she's like, no, me, I don't want her to die. And then it goes back and forth. And eventually both the symbiote and the girl realize that they actually care about each other more than they thought. And they just start fighting. Like, no, me, no, me, no, me. And I was like, clearly you guys can't decide. So how about we talk about this later? And meanwhile, you guys figure out your shit. Because clearly you guys care about each other more than you actually admit. So both the symbiote and the girl were being teens, is what was happening. They were being siblings and just having a fight. And eventually later on, I learned, they come back and they explained, they talked it over and they're feeling better. They're still struggling a little bit, but they're going to give each other time. And good ending to that, right? And then more scenarios of like, the point is though, it's mostly a success, and only those who willingly joined and or who were born with the symbiotes basically got infected basically. And it was a really interesting daydream I had. So that's it. That's really it. That's all there is to it. I mean, I could daydream more, but like the gist of it was, there were clearly riots against this scenario, and also people who supported it, those who were on the fence about it, and, it's just, that's it. There's something else that happened. I don't remember what. I remember I had issues, like, oh, right. Something happened and a lot of people died, because of riots, of these terrorists, basically. And I started to doubt myself as mother, as the leader. And the hive mind inside of me was trying to explain it. It's okay. And I'm freaking out. I'm having a mental breakdown, a mental emotional breakdown, because so many people died, both humans and also, those who have symbiotes. And like, I'm just like starting to cry and I can't handle this. And there's others around me who are seeing this happen, both those who are just like physically in my vicinity and also those who are mentally connected to me, and they're like, they feel bad for me. And like, eventually the hive mind is like, fine, it's okay. Because I tell him to just consume me, just take me over. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I'm tired. And he does. And include everyone on the entire like mental web, and also those in my physical vicinity, are freaking out. They're like, what the fuck did he just do? Because everyone cared about me. And then he explains that she's just asleep. I'm just sleeping, right? I'm just asleep. Mentally, I'm just asleep. But everyone's like starting to hate him. And like so many of them, even the symbiotes themselves, are like, start to block the connection. Because the thing about this whole scenario is it's possible to block the connection if you wanted to. It's completely possible. It's like turning off your phone or like just disconnecting from the internet, you know? You're still connected technically, and the hive mind can detect your at least physical condition to see if you're well or not. But unless it's an emergency, they will not force the connection, right? Unless it's like a national emergency or the individual's about to die, you know, they'll allow the disconnect, right? It's important. I explained to the hive mind early on this sort of interaction would be very important. So we had to figure out how to do this, and we figured it out early on in the peaceful takeover, you know. And anyways, fast forward to the more recent scenario. I am basically put to sleep, and the symbiote, the hive mind, let's call him father, right? He eventually tries to calm things down and take care of things, and he does the things that need to be done that mother could not do. But while also understanding she would be unhappy with certain things, so he tries to do it carefully, of course, and peacefully, within reason. And one of the people who was taken over early on and has their own symbiote, is who maintained calm this entire time. My brother, let's say. My brother is like, she's not going to be happy not being there to see everything, right? You know how much she values memories and experiences, right? And the father is like, I know. And it's why I'll share my memories with her later on. And I know she's not going to be happy with it, but I don't want her to die. Simply put, right? He didn't want me to die. So it's interesting. It's a really interesting scenario that ended up happening. But that's the end of the daydream. The dream that became a daydream. That's the end of it. And hopefully I spoke coherently enough where you can actually understand what I was talking about. Because I could tell I was slurring my words. And I'm not happy with that. So, oh boy, I'm going to have to go over this later. Aren't I? Whatever. Point is, it was neat. And there were other dreams I had that I don't remember too well, unfortunately. One dream, I was on the run on this highway in a car with my family from these people trying to hurt us. And us eventually finding a way to outrun them and hide in the bush in our car. And we turned off the car, and they drove past us, I think. I don't remember the details of that dream anymore, so that's basically it. All we have right there. On Earth, completely separate from the symbiotic scenario, right? And yeah, I don't remember anything else. So I slept well. I really did. I really need that sleep. I did not sleep well the previous day. And yeah, it's like almost 4:00, and clearly I got up at 2, but I really needed that sleep. It was like 9:30. At 9:30 in the morning is 12 hours. 17 hours, basically. More like 15, because I was in and out of consciousness and I kept waking up. So 15 and 17 hours of sleep. So, okay. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed my nonsense. Hopefully it was coherent enough. It probably wasn't, but I will try to clarify it in the future if I ever listen to it again on stream. And I will see you next time, I guess. Talk to you later. Bye. Bye-bye.